I'd just drop in and say before we go to it is this, right? The problem I also have with this team, all in all, is like I do get the vibe in this particular squad, like they never ever really actually figured out any of the structure of this team. Like they just hoped. Essentially, they just hoped they all wake up and they're playing from last year. That's what it felt like, or Bjergsen from 3 years ago or whatever. So as a result, like the other angle I'd say on this particular one as well is like, this should be the end probably. Like, look, you can choose to play again, you can reformulate, but like, you can't, as you say, you cannot run this roster back. In fact, the segue I wanted to bring up here was, wouldn't you say, because it's been implied like that we aren't going to have the same overinflation of salaries and general amount's going to go down. The corollary with that, I think when you look also at Vitality, and obviously Fnatic did get away with it, but they almost didn't. Like, it feels like the era of the Western Super Team is over and people are now going to just try and build proper teams again. Do you get the same vibe?
I mean, I hope that's the case. I think probably the main issue is that there is a dearth of qualified GMs to be able to make the calls about how to construct these rosters. I think that's honestly one of the biggest problems that you have in the scene, because you have to have a long history of knowing which kind of players tend to play well with each other. You have to have knowledge of player personalities and attitudes from established veterans. Like, you have to have pretty deep connections, I think, to make intelligent decisions, because it's not just about play style, it's about personality compatibility, getting the right coaches, having your players accept the coaching from said coaches, dealing with the superstar egos, or at least having respect from the players as a GM. So I think it's really tough to find those people. Obviously, the big free agent's going to be Deficio, right? Coming off of Misfits, considering we're by the way, guys, our guest today is Coach Carter from Misfits, who's going to come on, who is robbed of coaching staff of the split. But that's a bummer. But I think we'll put a cap on the kind of Misfits performance and talk a little bit about what Deficio did with that roster. But I think just objectively, look at the number of new players that Misfits have run into the LEC over the years, and they've done it on a very small budget ever since they tried to and failed to assemble their own super team. What I think is funny about Misfits is that they went big for the super team, and then they were like, nope, we're just going to change our strategy, go for the value, and yet they were still consistently making playoffs, having winning squads. So we'll get into that. But Deficio is probably a really important person who we know factually is going to be a free agent and can put this together. I think most of the other people within LCS, for all intents and purposes, like you had somebody who had been in Parth or in Reggie, who had been in the scene forever, putting together the TSM rosters. Jack has been involved. I mean, Jack is basically the GM of the League of Legends team. He has a huge amount of say in what goes on there. And Jack, I know from talking to him, has a pretty well-developed philosophy about how he wants to build out his players, what kind of players he thinks works well with Cloud9, hence the whole systems joke, which, by the way, has come back amazingly well. All of you guys who were like, what are these stupid systems? When LS left the coaching and they decided to get rid of Summit, the reigning MVP. I will tell you guys that in my experience, Cloud9 is a really well-defined method for having players on this roster and for the way that they want to proceed. And it continues to work. You guys cry, but Cloud9 does better internationally than any other team in League of Legends history from LCS. And that is a result of Jack knowing what the fuck he's doing, right? So the narrative of like, oh, Jensen came back to save them. He didn't have to sign Jensen, guys. He could have signed another import top laner and kept Fudge in the mid lane. Like, you have to respect his moves at a certain point in time and the way that he is able to gel these rosters and find identities for them.
Also, wait a minute. The same people who'd be now, because they're going to do that, they're going to retcon Jensen for where he is now. By the way, when he goes to Worlds and has a bunch of pop-offs, they'll say that's who he was the whole time, and they'll go, it was obvious you signed Jensen, you idiot. There's all reason Peter Dunn was memeing about why didn't he sign Jensen when he won spring. When he coming in the summer, no fan thought it should be Jensen over fucking Bjergsen. And in fact, because Jensen hadn't played, the whole vibe at the beginning of the split was he's shit. He's probably going to be tanking it. In fact, before the playoffs, Cloud9 wasn't even a top 3 team most of the split. They looked wonky as fuck. Like, it's only now. This just shows how when you win, people use results-based analysis, don't they? Now suddenly, it was obvious this roster's great. And give me a break.
Jensen hasn't been great. He's been much better in the playoffs, but he wasn't really great during the regular split. But I think here's the thing that really speaks to Cloud9. Unlike TL, they're like opposite TL. when I watch Cloud9, I actually feel like everybody on that team wants to fucking carry a game. Yeah, Fudge is going to play carry top laners. Like, Jensen feels like he's getting back into his groove right now. Berserker clearly wants to carry some fucking games. Blabber always wants to carry games. Like, none of these things have shifted. So the desire for these players to create the outplays and create the scenarios which cause wins and be aggressive is there with Cloud9. You watch Team Liquid and they're just slowly dying out there on Summoner's Rift, and no one wants to take responsibility. Yeah, Cloud9 might just randomly int at times, but usually they try to do it as they're attempting to make a play. They feel motivated in a way that Cloud9 and to a lesser degree, I think EG just don't feel super motivated right now. At least with EG, it feels like JoJo wants to pop off. So you got that going for you.
I forgot the point I waffled about earlier because I lost it. The point I was going to make on the Bjergsen thing to end it, so I'll tie it back into Team Liquid, is miss me with that whole shit narrative I've had to hear all year that Bjergsen was intentionally playing this supportive style, because you guys make that sound like that's impossible to make work. I've watched Faker do it all year long, you idiots. I watched Joinby do it for fucking years at a time with totally different junglers for years and years and years before any of you ever heard of him, because he never used to make worlds. That style can work. Bjergsen was not doing that. Bjergsen clearly could not play some of the carries, either main carry threat, and was just doing, I would guess, a band-aid of whatever worked. I would guess that's just what worked in scrims. In scrims, maybe he accelerated Hans Sama or he helped the jungler get ahead of something. But the problem was, even then it wasn't oh, he's sort of it's he's like Samwise Gamgee. If he carries you, then you can carry. It's not that shit, mate. He just wasn't a very good player, this split. You don't have to make a shit fucking narrative around it. It just wasn't that good. He wasn't that good. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.